The morning I arrived to take command, no one on the post knew my name, and I liked it that way. It was the last week of a wet spring, and the sky over the installation was the flat gray of a wrung-out cloth, the kind of light that makes a place look like every other place. I came through the gate at 0600 hours before the traffic, in an old canvas jacket and jeans, with a manila folder tucked under my arm and a paper cup of gas station coffee going cold in my hand. I had learned a long time ago that the first morning on a new post tells you nothing true about a place. The buildings are just buildings. The faces are strangers. So I did not brace, and I did not perform. I just walked in and let the morning be ordinary. I had done this 11 times in 21 years. New gate, new sign-in roster, new clerk who does not look up. You learn to read a unit the way you read weather, by the small signs. And you learn that the reading you do on the first day is provisional, a pencil sketch you will erase and redraw 100 times before you understand the terrain. I was in no hurry to be understood. I had a whole command in front of me for that. The central issue facility sat at the far end of a row of low warehouses, a big metal building the color of a nickel, with roll-up doors and a smell coming off it that every soldier knows in the back of the throat. Canvas, machine oil, floor wax, and the particular dust that settles on gear that has been folded and stacked and waiting for years. I had an appointment to draw my field issue before the ceremony at the end of the week. It is a small, dull errand, standing at a counter while a clerk pulls duffel bags of equipment off shelves and checks your name against a list. I could have sent someone. A lieutenant colonel does not have to stand in her own supply line, but I have never been able to make myself send another person to do a thing I could do with my own 2 hands. And I wanted to see the place run before the place knew I was watching. I had come the day before, quietly, and driven the perimeter of the post alone in the evening, the way I always do before I take a command, so that when I stood in front of the battalion, I would at least know the ground they lived on. I had seen the barracks and the motor pools and the chapel and the little strip of fast food outside the gate where soldiers go to feel like civilians for an hour. I had seen the memorial by the headquarters, the modest stone one that every post has, with the names on it, and I had stood in front of it for a while in the dark, the way I do, and read the names of people I never met, because reading the names is a habit I do not intend to break. A post tells you what it values by how it keeps its names. This one kept them clean and lit, and I had thought, that is a good sign, whatever else I find here. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed in that low, steady way that gets into your teeth after an hour. There were rows of plastic chairs bolted to a rail, a long counter with a scuffed laminate top, and behind it the cage, a chain-link partition with shelving that ran back into the dim. A young soldier stood at the window with a stack of forms, and behind him, at a computer, sat a corporal with the particular posture of a man who had decided a long time ago that the people in front of him were an interruption of his day rather than the reason for it. I took a chair near the wall and set my folder on my knee and waited my turn, and I watched. I could tell you that I did not judge the room. That would not be true. 21 years does something to your eyes. You cannot switch it off any more than a carpenter can walk into a house and not see the seam where the trim was rushed. I sat in that plastic chair and I saw a supply point that was clean where it needed to be and sloppy where no one was looking. I saw a hand receipt book left open on the counter, face up, with names and serial numbers a stranger could read. I saw a fire lane with a hand truck parked across it. I saw a corporal who called the next number without looking up, and I saw the young private at the window flinch a little every time the corporal sighed. I could have said one sentence and changed the entire morning. I could have crossed to that counter and introduced myself and watched the posture of every person in the building rearrange around me. I have that sentence in my pocket at all times. I had spent 20 years learning not to use it unless it served something larger than my own comfort. A leader who reaches for her rank to fix a small feeling teaches everyone around her that rank is for small feelings. I did not want to teach that. So I sat, and I ached a little in the left knee, the way I always do when the weather turns. From a morning 15 years ago I do not talk about, and I let the place show me who it was. The private at the window was 19, maybe 20, with a haircut 2 days past regulation and a folder of paperwork that had clearly been assembled in a panic. His name tape said Renner. He was trying to in-process, and the forms had defeated him, and the corporal behind the counter was not helping so much as narrating his failure back to him. "That's the wrong copy," the corporal said. "That's the yellow. I need the white. You had one job, man." Renner's ears went red. He shuffled the pages, he dropped one, bent for it, and knocked the whole stack sideways. I got up before I had decided to. I crossed to the row of chairs beside him, gathered the pages that had slid to the floor, and squared them against my knee without a word, The way you square anything, and then I found the white copy in the mess and slid it to the top and handed the stack back to him so the corporal could see only that the problem was solved and not how. Top one's your white, I said, quiet, just for him. The rest is in date order. You're fine. He looked at me the way soldiers look at a stranger who has done them a small kindness in front of someone who is enjoying their trouble, which is to say with a gratitude a little too large for the size of the favor. Thank you, ma'am, he said. You had it, I told him. You just had too many hands and not enough counter. There is a thing that happens to your eyes over 21 years that you cannot undo, and it is not cynicism, though people mistake it for that. It is the opposite of cynicism. It is the inability to stop seeing the person under the uniform, the 19-year-old under the bad haircut, the panic under the dropped paperwork, the whole soft human machinery that the institution is built to press into a shape, and that never quite goes all the way into the shape no matter how hard you press. I had commanded a lot of soldiers. I had buried a few. I had signed the papers that sent them where they went, and I had written the letters that came back the other way, and the sum of all of it was that I could not look at a boy fumbling a stack of forms and see an inconvenience. I saw a person somebody was waiting on at home. That is not a soft way to see the world. It is the most expensive way there is, and I had paid for it in full, and I would not have traded it for the corporal's easy blindness for anything on this earth. I thought about my own first weeks in a uniform, how large everything had seemed, how a counter like this one had felt like a checkpoint you might fail, how a single sharp word from a bored specialist could ruin a whole day when you were new and did not yet know that the specialist was bored, and that his boredom was not a verdict on you. I had promised myself, somewhere in those first weeks, that if I ever got to the far side of the counter, I would not be the sharp word. It is an easy promise to make and a hard one to keep, because the counter wears you down. The line never ends. The same mistakes come at you all day long, and it takes a discipline to keep seeing people as people when they are, hour after hour, arriving to be your problem. Discipline is the only word for it. It is not kindness, exactly. Kindness runs out. Discipline is what you use when kindness runs out, and I had a great deal of it, and I spent it freely, and I watched the corporal spend none. I went back to my chair. The corporal glanced at me for the first time, a flat, incurious glance, filed me under nobody, and called the next number, which was not mine, though mine was next. I was not angry. I want to be honest about that because the story is easy to tell as anger. And it was not anger. It was recognition. The tired kind. The kind you feel when a thing that has happened to you many times happens again and you realize you're going to have to walk through all of its rooms one more time. The first time a man decided who I was before he knew my name, I was a second lieutenant, 24 years old, standing in a motor pool in another country with a map I did not need help reading. A sergeant first class had taken one look at me and decided I was lost, and he had given me directions to a place I had not asked about. Slowly, the way you talk to a tourist. And when I had thanked him and gone exactly where I had always been going, he had laughed to another soldier, not cruelly, just certainly, the certainty of a man who knows how the world is arranged. I had logged it the way you log weather. I had not corrected him. I had simply done my job in front of him for the next 11 months until the arrangement of the world he was so certain of had quietly rearranged itself. And by the end he called me by my rank without irony, and I never once made him say he had been wrong. It was not the last time either. There was a captain, years later, who addressed every question about my own platoon to the male lieutenant standing next to me, so consistently and so obliviously that the lieutenant himself started getting embarrassed and redirecting the questions back to me, and the captain never once noticed he was doing it. There was a range where I was handed a clipboard and asked to hold it, as if the woman present must be the one keeping the roster, and I held the clipboard, and then I shot, and I did not say anything because the target sheet says a great deal more clearly than I ever could. There was a briefing where a colonel talked over the top of me for a full 3 minutes until he ran out of things to say and had to let me finish the sentence he had interrupted, which turned out to be the sentence that answered the question he had spent 3 minutes failing to answer himself. I did not collect these the way you collect grievances. I collected them the way you collect data. Each one taught me the same thing, which is that a certain kind of person will always tell you what they think you are, immediately and for free, and that the information is useful, because it tells you exactly how much room you have to work before they start watching you closely. Being underestimated is not an insult if you let it become a habit of theirs and a tool of yours. That is the thing I learned in that motor pool and never unlearned. When a person decides you are small, they stop watching you carefully, and there is a great deal you can accomplish while a person is not watching you carefully. I had built most of a career in that blind spot. I had learned to be patient inside it, to let the record accumulate, to let the truth arrive on its own schedule with its boots on, rather than dragging it out early and cheap to win a moment at a counter. So when the corporal skipped my number, I did not stand up and announce myself. I looked at the clock on the wall, an institutional clock with a red second hand, and I gave the morning a little more time to be what it was going to be. Next, the corporal said finally, and this time he was looking at me and I could see him decide, in the half second before I stood, that I was going to be more trouble than I was worth. I came to the counter and set my folder down and slid it toward him. Closed. "Good morning," I said. "I've got a CIF appointment. Ellison." He did not open the folder. He looked at the jacket, the jeans, the cold coffee I had set on the edge of the counter, and he looked at my face, and he did the arithmetic that men like him do, and he came up with the answer he had already decided on before I opened my mouth. "You in the right building, ma'am," he said. "Family stuff, ID cards, all that, that's the annex. Next building over. This is the issue point. It's for soldiers." "I'm in the right building," I said. He sighed, the same sigh he had spent on Renner, and pulled the folder toward him with 2 fingers, the way you handle something you expect to be a waste of your time. He still did not open it. He tapped it on the counter to square it, which was, I will admit, the first correct thing I had seen him do all morning, and then he set it back down, unopened, and leaned on his forearms. "Look," he said, and his voice had shifted into the register menus when they are about to be reasonable at you. "I don't know what you were told, but this counter is for people who earned their pay. You want dependent services, the annex handles all of that, spouse ID, TRICARE, commissary card, all of it." He said the word spouse, the way some people say the word amateur. "I'm not looking for dependent services," I said. "Then you're looking for the wrong window," he said, and he picked up my folder, and without opening it, without reading the first line of the first page, he dropped it into the gray plastic bin at the end of the counter where the discards go, the rejected forms, the wrong copies, the paper that has failed to be important. "Go collect your check somewhere else. Some of us have real soldiers to supply." The building did not go silent, because buildings do not, but a kind of attention gathered. Renner had stopped by the door with his squared paperwork and was watching. 2 other soldiers in the chairs had looked up. The private on the far side of the cage had paused with a duffel in his hands. I reached into the bin and took my folder back out. I did it without heat, the way you retrieve anything that has been put in the wrong place, and I set it on the counter again, and I smoothed the cover with the flat of my hand. "I'd like you to open it," I said. There is a particular loneliness in the second before you decide how you are going to answer contempt. It is the loneliest I ever get. In that second, you can feel the whole cheap, satisfying shape of the easy answer, the answer where you flatten a 24-year-old with a word and watch him fold, and you can feel how good it would feel. And you have to decide, again, that you are not going to be a person who takes that feeling. Because the kindest thing and the hardest thing were the same thing, and they were this: to let it play out without helping it along, to let the truth arrive as itself and not as a weapon I threw. I did not yet know that I would not have to throw anything. I did not know, standing there with my hand flat on the folder, that the man who was about to change the temperature of the room was already moving. The corporal, whose name tape I could now read, Vance, did not open the folder. My asking had backed him into the corner of his own audience, and a certain kind of young man, once he has an audience, would rather be wrong loudly than right quietly. He straightened up off his forearms and folded his arms across his chest. "Ma'am, I'm not going to open it because it doesn't matter what's in it," he said. "You don't have a common access card out on the counter. You walked in here in civilian clothes. I've been doing this window for 2 years, and I know a runaround when it walks up to me. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your folder, and you're going to go to the annex, and you're going to let me get back to the soldiers who are actually in my line." He tipped his head at the room, at his audience, and he let a small grin onto his face, the grin of a man who believes he has just won something. "Enlisted for the check. Every time." He said it to me, but he said it for them, and one of the soldiers in the chairs made a sound that was almost a laugh, and I felt the old pull the one I have felt in 100 rooms, to make myself smaller so the moment could end, to just go to the annex, to let him keep his window and his certainty because it was not worth the fight. I did not go to the annex, but I did not raise my voice either. I had made my decision in that lonely second, and the decision was to stand exactly where I was, plainly, and let the folder be opened by whoever the morning sent to open it. That is when the NCOIC came out of the cage. I heard him before I placed him, the particular sound of a senior sergeant crossing a supply floor, boots square, no hurry and no drift, the walk of a man who owns the space he is moving through. He had come out to see why his line had stalled, the way any good NCO comes out when the rhythm of his shop goes wrong, and he was already half-turned toward Vance with a correction on his face for the hold-up, not for the content of it, because he had not heard the content yet, only the stall. His name tape said deal. He was around 38, built solid through the shoulders, the way men get who have spent a career lifting things that resist being lifted, with a supply sergeant's ballpoint clipped to his pocket and a clipboard in his left hand. He came up on Vance's side of the counter, glanced at the corporal, glanced at the room, and then his eyes fell, the way a supply sergeant's eyes always fall, to the paperwork on the counter, to the folder under my hand, to the top line of the top page, which I had not turned toward him and did not need to, because a folder on a counter is readable upside down to anyone who has read 10,000 of them. He read the top line, and his hand stopped on the clipboard. I did not recognize him at first. I want to be truthful about the order of things. He recognized me before he finished reading my name. I watched it happen on his face, watched something travel up through him from a long way down, watched the professional supply floor blankness break apart and something much older and much worse come up underneath it. And for a moment he was not a sergeant first class on a Tuesday morning at all. He was somewhere else entirely. He was somewhere I had been too. "Ma'am," he said, his voice had gone quiet and strange, the volume of a man in a church. "It's you." 15 years fell through the floor of that supply point, and I was in another country, in the dark before a dawn that came in wrong, with dust in my teeth and a truck on fire and my own hands doing a thing I have never been able to fully describe to anyone who was not there. And in the middle of it, a face. A boy's face then, 19 or 20, pinned in a vehicle that was filling with smoke, and my hands on the strap that held him, and the strap not giving, and then giving. Deal. Private first class. Deal. I had not known, until that second at the counter, whether he had lived past that year. You do not always find out. You carry the ones you pulled clear the same way you carry the ones you did not, in a kind of permanent not knowing, and here was one of them, grown into a broad-shouldered sergeant, standing in front of me with his hand frozen on a clipboard, and he was alive, and he was looking at me like I had walked out of the one morning he had spent 15 years trying to walk out of. The counter went still, and Corporal Vance, who could see his sergeant's face but could not read a word written on it, did not understand yet. He did not understand at all. "Sergeant Deal, I've got this," Vance said, and I could hear the thing under his voice, the flailing of a man who feels the ground moving and does not know which way to run, so he runs harder in the direction he was already going. "She doesn't have a CAC out. She walked in civvies. I already told her the annex is next door. It's a runaround. I've got it handled." Deal did not look at him. Deal was still looking at me, and his throat worked, and I watched him try to be a sergeant again, try to put the supply floor back together around the thing that had just walked into it. "Corporal," Deal said, and now he did turn, slowly, and his voice had changed, and Vance heard the change, even if he did not understand it. "Stand down." "Sergeant, I'm just saying the annex handles that. Stand down." It was not loud. That is the part people never believe when I tell it. The two hardest sentences I have ever heard a man say to another man were not loud. Deal said, "Stand down," the way you set something heavy on the ground when your arms are shaking, carefully, so it does not break. And Vance finally stopped talking, and the grin was gone off his face now, replaced by the dawning, sickly confusion of a young man who has realized the room knows something he does not. And here was my second lonely second, the one I had been half expecting since I walked through the gate. Because now I had the room, now the truth was standing up on its own, and I could write it wherever I wanted. I could let Deal say the whole thing. I could let the boy in the chairs, who had almost laughed, sit in it. I could take the cheap and total victory that a bad morning had set down in front of me like a gift. I did not want him on the floor. I want to say that plainly, because it is the whole of what I believe about leading people. I did not want Corporal Vance destroyed. I wanted him to understand the difference between a person and a paycheck, which is a thing you can only learn while you're still standing up. I have watched other commanders make the other choice over the years, and I want to be fair to them, because the other choice is not evil, it is only small. I have watched a senior officer take a young soldier apart at a counter for a slight, in front of a crowd, and I have watched the crowd enjoy it, and I have watched the officer walk away pleased, and I have watched what it left behind, which is a shop full of soldiers who learned that the powerful use the truth as a club when it suits them, and who therefore resolved quietly never to be caught, never to admit, never to open a folder in front of someone who might turn out to matter. That is what humiliation teaches. It does not teach humility. Humility and humiliation share a root and nothing else. Humiliation teaches concealment, and a command that runs on concealment is a command that will fail you on the one morning you need the truth to come up out of it fast and clean. So I made the smaller move, that is the harder move. I did not perform my rank. I did not raise my voice to match the size of the insult, because the insult did not deserve to set the volume of my answer. I let the fact be a fact and not a weapon. So I reached out and I turned my own folder around, unhurried, and I opened it myself to the first page, and I slid it across the counter so the corporal could read the top line that his sergeant had already read. He read it. I watched his eyes go across it once, fast, the way you read something you are hoping does not say what you are afraid it says. And then a second time, slow, because it did. Orders, assumption of command, a name, my name, and a rank beside it, lieutenant colonel, and below that, the line of the battalion I had come across the country to take. The battalion this central issue facility supported. The battalion Corporal Dustin Vance belonged to, whether he had thought about it that way or not, whether he had ever once imagined that the woman he was sending to the annex would in 4 days stand at the front of a formation that included him and take the colors. The color left his face the way water leaves a sink, all at once and from the top down. His arms came uncrossed, his mouth opened and nothing came out of it, and I watched him understand, in real time, that the word he had reached for, the word check, the word he had thrown at me to make the room laugh, was going to live in this building for a very long time, and that he had thrown it at his own incoming battalion commander across a counter in front of a private, and a room full of chairs. "Ma'am," he said, "it came out cracked." "Ma'am, process the line first," I said. I did not say it to Vance. I said it to Deal, evenly, because the rhythm of his shop had stalled, and a supply point with a stalled line is a supply point that is failing soldiers who have nothing to do with me, and the mission comes before the moment, always, even a moment like this one, especially a moment like this one. There were 4 soldiers in those chairs who needed their gear and did not need to spend their morning as the audience for a corporal's education. Deal blinked. Something in him settled at being given a task, the way it settles in all of us. "Yes, ma'am," he said. He turned to the private by the cage. "Get Renner's issue pulled, then the rest of the chairs in order." He looked at Vance, and for a moment the sergeant in him and the man in him were at war on his face, and the sergeant won. Barely. "Corporal, step off the window. Go help pull stock. We'll talk." Vance stepped off the window. He moved like a man walking away from the sight of something he could not yet measure, and I stood at the counter with my open folder and my cold coffee, and I let the line start moving again, and I did not feel the thing I had been afraid I would feel, the ugly little warmth of winning. I felt tired, and I felt 15 years old in a place inside me, and I felt the weight of a name I had not said out loud in a long time starting to come up out of the dark where I keep it. Deal did not go back into the cage. He came around the end of the counter to my side of it, which is a thing a supply sergeant almost never does. And he stood in front of me at a loose, unofficial version of attention, and I could see him deciding whether the thing he wanted to say was allowed, whether it fit inside the walls of rank and duty that we both lived in. "Ma'am," he said again, and then the walls did not hold it. "You don't remember my name. There's no reason you would, but I was in the 3rd truck, on the clearance route, the one that—" "I remember the truck," I said. "I remember the strap." His face did something then that I will not try too hard to describe, because some things a person does with their face are theirs and not mine to hand around in a story. He nodded, once, and looked at the floor of his own supply point, the scuffed concrete, and then back up at me. "I've told that morning about 100 times," he said. "To my wife, to my kids, the older one, when he asked why I get quiet in the spring. I've told it 100 times, and I always tell it the same way, that there was an officer who came back through it when she did not have to, when the smart move, the move by the book, was to hold the far side and wait. And every single time I tell it, the person I'm telling goes, well, what was her name? And I never had it. 15 years, I never had the name. He shook his head slowly. And it was on a folder on my counter, and a kid I'm supposed to be training was about to send you to the annex. You had the name now, I said. That's the part that matters. Behind him, the young soldiers in the chairs had gone very quiet, and I understood that they had heard enough to understand the shape of it even without the details, and that the shape of it was rearranging the morning in their heads, and that Corporal Vance, over by the shelving with a duffel in his hands, had heard it too. I did not look at Vance. This was not for Vance yet. Then Deal did a thing I had not asked him to do, and would not have asked him to do, and it was the thing that closed the whole morning because it did not come from me. He turned halfway so that he was speaking to the room, and not only to me, to the two soldiers in the chairs, and the private by the cage, and the corporal frozen by the shelving, and he said it plainly, without heat, the way you state a fact that you have carried so long it has worn smooth. You all heard the word he used, Deal said. Check, like she came here to collect something she didn't earn. He let that sit a second. In 2011, this officer came back through fire that the book told her to leave alone to pull 3 of us out of a truck that was burning down around us. I was one of the 3. I am standing in this building, in this uniform, with 2 kids at home, because she did not do the smart thing that morning. So when you say a person enlisted for the check, you had better be very, very sure you know who is standing in front of you, because sometimes the person you are talking to is the reason another person got to go home. He turned back to me, and the volume came down out of him. That's the paycheck she came for, Corporal. 15 years late, and it's the only one she ever asked me for. It was not a speech. Deal was not a man who made speeches. It was testimony, which is a different thing, the report of a witness who was there, and it landed the way testimony lands, quietly and permanently, and I saw it go into the young soldiers in the chairs and change something in the set of their shoulders, and I saw it go into Vance and take the last of the color out of him. I did not add to it. There was nothing to add. A truth told by the person it happened to does not need a commander to underline it. The side door opened, and a command sergeant major came in out of the gray morning, a big man near 50 with a face like a closed ledger, and he took the room in with one pass of his eyes, the way senior enlisted men do, and he found me at the counter and crossed to me. Ma'am, he said, Command Sergeant Major Prosser, I was supposed to catch you at the gate and walk you through in processing. My apologies. Traffic on the west side. He glanced at Deal, at the stalled, then moving line, at the corporal by the shelves, and I watched him read the whole story off the surface of the room in about 2 seconds, because that is the job, and his jaw tightened a fraction. Everything all right in here, ma'am? Everything's fine, Sergeant Major, I said. Sergeant Deal and I were getting reacquainted. Prosser looked at Deal. Deal looked at Prosser. Something passed between them, sergeant to sergeant, and then Deal said simply, The colonel pulled me out of a vehicle in 2011, Sergeant Major. I didn't know she was our incoming until about 90 seconds ago. He paused. Corporal Vance didn't either. I watched Prosser's face, and I saw him make the same decision I had made, the choice about temperature, and I was glad of it, because a battalion where the command sergeant major reaches for the throat every time a young soldier fails is a battalion that produces liars, soldiers who hide their mistakes instead of fixing them, and I did not want that battalion. Prosser's eyes went to the corporal by the shelving, and they were not warm, but they were not ablaze either. We'll handle Corporal Vance through his chain, Prosser said to me, low. His squad leader, then his platoon sergeant. The right way, unless the colonel wants it otherwise. The right way, I said. Through his chain, I don't want it jumped. I meant it, and Prosser heard that I meant it, and I saw something in the old sergeant major loosen a quarter turn, a first small piece of the trust that a command runs on, given not because I had said the correct thing, but because I had declined to take the easy and cruel thing when it was sitting right in front of me. You do not earn that trust with a speech. You earn it in the small rooms, at the counters, when no one important is supposed to be watching, which is exactly when the people who will follow you are watching hardest. Sergeant Deal, I said, finish getting these soldiers their gear. Then if you have 10 minutes, I'd like you to walk me through my own issue yourself. I've drawn my field gear 11 times, and I've never once had the man who runs the shop do it personally. I'd take it as a favor. It would be my honor, ma'am, Deal said, and he meant the word honor in the full weight of it, and I let him have it because he had earned the right to mean it. Corporal Vance found me by the door 20 minutes later while Deal was in the cage pulling my duffels, and he had the look of a young man who had spent 20 minutes building and tearing down 100 versions of an apology and had arrived at the door with none of them finished. Ma'am, he said, I need to. I have to say, what I said about the check, about the annex, I didn't. Corporal, I said, and I stopped him, not unkindly, because a rushed apology is a thing a person does for themselves to get the bad feeling out, and I did not need his bad feeling out. I needed him to keep it a little while. I'm going to stop you, because if you finish that sentence right now, you'll feel better, and I don't think you feeling better is what this morning is for. He shut his mouth. To his credit, he shut it and he listened, which is more than a lot of men twice his age can do. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Your squad leader is going to counsel you. That's the right way, and I've asked the command sergeant major to make sure it goes the right way and not around it. What you said to me is not the thing you have to fix. What you said to me will fix itself, believe me. You will not forget this morning as long as you wear the uniform. The thing you have to fix is what you said to Renner before I ever got to the counter, and the way you run a window like the people in front of it are in your way. That's the real one. The check was just the loud version of it. He looked at me, and I watched him take it. Actually take it. Not the way a man takes a chewing out, hunched and waiting for it to be over, but the way a man takes a true thing, straight, with his eyes open. I expect you to be better, I said. Not gone. Better. There's a difference, and in about 4 days, I'm going to be responsible for teaching you the difference, along with about 600 other soldiers. So don't quit on me before I get the chance. Understood? Understood, ma'am, he said, and his voice was steadier now, and I thought, there, that is a soldier who might be worth the trouble after all, which is a thing you can almost never tell on a first morning, and which I had somehow been given the chance to find out. Renner came past with his issue in a duffel over his shoulder, squared away now, his paperwork done, and he stopped in front of me and came to a clumsy, earnest position of attention that he did not have to, and said, "Thank you, ma'am," again. And I understood he was thanking me for something larger than the white copy now, and I nodded to him, and he went out into the gray morning, a little taller than he had come in. Deal walked me through my own issue like it was a ceremony. He pulled each item, checked it against the list, laid it on the counter, told me what was new in the inventory since my last unit and what had been replaced and what to watch for in the field, and I let him. Because a man who has carried a thing for 15 years should be allowed to set some of it down in the only language he has, which for Sergeant First Class Marcus Deal was the language of gear laid out square and accounted for. Your kids, I said, while he checked the seams on a rucksack that did not need its seams checked. You said an older one. How many? 2, ma'am. Boys 12, girls 9. He said it, and his hands stilled on the ruck. The boy's the one who asked me why I get quiet in the spring. What did you tell him? I told him about the officer, he said. I told him there are people in this world who will come back through fire for you when the math says they shouldn't, and that when you meet one, you spend the rest of your life trying to be the kind of person they'd come back for. He looked up. I didn't have your name to tell him. I'm going to have it tonight. I had to look at the rucksack for a moment. Tell him it wasn't only me, I said. There were 4 of us who dismounted. Tell him that, and tell him one of us didn't come back out. Deal went still, and he knew, the way the men who were there always know, without my saying it, that I was talking about Specialist Ruben Ortega, 22 years old, who had gone into the 3rd truck for the driver while I went in for the crew, and who had gotten the driver out, and who had not gotten himself out. Deal had been in that truck. Deal had lived in part because Ortega had done his half of the work before the fire took the rest. There is no arithmetic that makes that morning add up. I stopped trying a long time ago. You do not solve it. You carry it, and you keep the names, and you pay what you can toward a debt that does not have a bottom. I think about him, Deal said quiet. Ortega. I didn't know him well. 1 patrol. But I think about him. Good, I said. Keep thinking about him. That's the whole job in the end. Keeping the names. I finished my issue, signed the hand receipt, and carried my own duffels out to my truck because I was not going to have a man who had already carried enough carry my bags. The gray morning had started to lift a little at the edges, the way they do, a thin brightness coming up behind the cloud, and I sat in the cab of my truck in the CIF parking lot for a few minutes before I drove to my new office, and I let the morning I do not talk about come all the way up, once on purpose, because I have found that it is better to let it come up when you choose than to have it come up when you do not. It had been a route clearance mission, the kind we ran 100 of, the kind that is 999 parts tedium and 1 part the thing you spend the tedium bracing for. We were opening a road at first light so that the traffic behind us could move, And my company had done it so many times that the danger had gone quiet in us, the way danger does when nothing happens for long enough. Which is exactly when it is most dangerous, because a soldier who has stopped feeling the danger has stopped doing the small, careful things that the danger requires. I had been fighting that in my company for months, the creeping calm, the way good soldiers get bored, and boredom gets people killed. And I had been hard about it, harder than I was comfortable being, and some of them had thought I was hard for no reason. The first vehicle found the pressure plate the way you never want to find it, which is with the front of the truck. The sound of it is not a sound so much as a change in the world. A slap that comes up through the ground and through your boots and through your teeth, and then the ordinary morning is gone and there is only the after. And in the after, before the dust had even come back down, the far side of the road opened up on us, small arms fire from a tree line. Because the plate had never been the whole plan, the plate had been the opening line of it, the thing meant to stop us in the killing zone so the rest could work. The book, in that moment, is clear, and the book is right. And the book says you hold the far side, and you suppress the tree line, and you do not send people forward into a burning vehicle in a beaten zone, because the arithmetic of it says you will lose more than you save. I knew the book, I had taught the book, and I sat in my own vehicle for a second and a half that has lasted 15 years, and I did the arithmetic, and then I did the thing the arithmetic said not to do, because the third truck was on fire, and there were men in it, and I simply could not hold a line while they burned. I have never been able to decide whether that was courage or the failure of my nerve to do the correct and terrible thing. I have decided it does not matter which. Some choices are made below the place where words like courage live. I remember dismounting. I remember the heat of the third truck from 10 feet away, a wall of it. I remember Specialist Ruben Ortega beside me, 22 years old, going up onto the truck for the driver's side while I went for the crew. And I remember thinking, in the clear, strange calm that comes over you at the worst moments, that he moved well, that he was good, that I would tell him so afterward. I remember the strap on the boy in the back, Deal, though I did not know his name, the strap that had fused half melted and would not release, and I remember sawing at it with the blade I kept for exactly this, and the strap not giving, and my hands starting to shout at me from the heat, and then it gave all at once, and we came off the truck together in a heap. I let myself be 28 again, in the dark, with the truck on fire, and the strap not giving and then giving, and Ortega going into the smoke and not coming out, and the long, roaring, narrow minutes of it, and the way the sun had come up afterward like nothing had happened, the way the sun always does. I let it come, and I sat with it, and I did the thing I have taught myself to do, which is not to solve it and not to flee it, but to hold it, the way you hold a photograph, and then to fold it, carefully, along the same soft creases it has been folded along 1,000 times, and put it back. Ortega's mother had written me once, about a year after, a short letter in careful handwriting, not angry, which was the part that undid me because I could have carried angry. She had not been angry. She had wanted to know if her son had been afraid, and whether he had said anything, and whether he had done well. And I had written her back and told her the truth, which was that her son had gone up onto a burning truck for another man without being told to, and had gotten that man out, and that if he was afraid, he did not let it slow his hands, and that he had done more than well. He had done the thing that the whole idea of a soldier is built around, and almost no one is ever actually asked to do. I had told her that her son was the reason a father named Ellison had a daughter still, because the driver Ortega pulled out had a little girl at home, and I had meant every word, and then the years had closed over the correspondence the way a field closes over a track, and I had let a woman who had given the army her only son drift to the far end of a Christmas card list, and that was a debt too, a quieter one, and it was mine. 15 years I had not known whether the boy in the third truck had lived. Now I knew. It did not balance anything. Ortega was still gone. The debt did not have a bottom. But there was a sergeant first class in that metal building who was going to go home tonight and finally give his son a name to go with the story, and that was not nothing. In the arithmetic of who you save and who you do not, which never adds up, that was not nothing. I took out a small notebook I keep, and I wrote a single line in it, the way I do, a line to do a thing I had let too many years pass without doing. Find Ortega's mother. She had written me, once, a long time ago, and I had written her back, and then the years had done what years do. I wrote her name so I would not let the years do it again. Then I put the notebook away, and I started the truck. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be clear about that at the end, because a story like this one gets told as a triumph, The nobody who turned out to be somebody? The corporal who got what was coming? It was not that. There was no victory in it. A young man had made a bad guess about a woman in a canvas jacket, and it had cracked open a much older thing. And out of the crack had come a name I had carried, and a name I had lost, and a boy I had pulled from a fire, standing whole in front of me with children of his own. If there was anything in it, it was not victory. It was just the record, keeping itself, the way it always does, arriving on its own schedule with its boots on. 4 days later, I stood at the front of a formation on a damp parade field and took command of the battalion. It is a small ceremony, as these things go, older than any of us, a passing of colors from one set of hands to another, a few words from the brigade commander, a lot of standing still. Colonel Hargrove said the things brigade commanders say, and most of them are the same at every such ceremony, but one of them he seemed to mean, which was that the battalion was getting a commander who had been to the places she would be sending them and had come back through the worst of it for the people under her. And I saw, in the ranks, a broad-shouldered sergeant first class standing at attention with his eyes forward and something working in his jaw. And I saw, 3 rows back, a corporal standing very straight, more straight than the corporals around him, a young man determined to be seen doing the thing right. The field was damp under us, and the colors hung heavy in the wet air, not snapping the way they do on a bright day, just hanging, which somehow suited the morning better. The outgoing commander passed the colors to the brigade commander, and the brigade commander passed them to me, that old chain of hands that is older than any of us and will outlast all of us. And I felt the weight of the staff come into my palms, and I thought, as I always think at that moment, of how many hands had held this before mine, and how few of them anyone remembered by name, and how the not being remembered was not the tragedy people take it for, because the work is the point, and not the memory of the worker. I took the colors, I said the few words a new commander says, and I kept them short because I have sat through too many long ones. I told them I did not yet know them, and they did not yet know me, and that the knowing would happen where it always happens, not at ceremonies, but at counters and in motor pools and in the small rooms where no one important is supposed to be watching. I told them I had exactly one standard, and it was this, that we would treat the person in front of us as the reason for our work and not as an interruption of it every time. From the newest private at an issue window to me, I told them I would hold them to it and that they should hold me to it too. Then I stood them at ease and we got to work. I found out later, the way a commander finds things out, sideways and after the fact, that the story of that morning had moved through the battalion faster than any order I ever gave. That is how it always is. The official information travels at the speed of paperwork, and the true information travels at the speed of soldiers talking in a smoke pit. And by the time I signed for the colors, every private in the formation knew that the new commander had been sent to the annex by a supply corporal and had reached into the discard bin for her own folder and asked him quietly to open it. I did not mind that they knew. A story like that does more work than a speech. It told them what I would and would not do before I had the chance to tell them myself. And it told them the truest way, which is by what actually happened, and not by what I claimed about myself. And I have never in my life been able to make a formation believe a claim the way one true story makes them believe. Corporal Vance stayed in the battalion. His squad leader counseled him the right way, through his chain, and I stayed out of it the way I had said I would. And over the following weeks, I watched from the distance a commander watches from as a young man who had thrown a cheap word across a counter became, slowly and unevenly, the way it always happens, a soldier who opened the folder first and asked the question before he made the guess. I heard months on that he had become the one at the window who was gentlest with the new privates, the ones who came in with their paperwork in a panic, and that when a young soldier fumbled a stack of forms, he would square it for them without making it a lesson. And I do not know for certain that he learned that from me from that morning, but I know where I have seen it before, and I know that people teach what they were taught, both the cruelty and the mercy, and that on any given morning, a person gets to choose which one to pass on. I do not tell you he was transformed. People are not transformed. That is a word for stories. I tell you he got better, which is a smaller word and a truer one, and the only kind of change I have ever actually seen a person make. The standard held. And a standard held, it turns out, can save a soldier the same as a strap that finally gives. Sergeant First Class Deal ran the best supply point I have ever had under my command, and his son, I am told, knows the name now and tells the spring story with the name in it. I have thought a great deal since that morning about the word he used. Check. As in, you enlisted for the check. As in, some of us earned our pay, and some of us just showed up to collect it. It is a small, mean idea, and it is everywhere, and it did not start with a corporal at a supply window, and it will not end with him. The idea that a person's worth is a thing you can read off the surface of them, off the jacket they wore, and the way they carried themselves through a door, off whether they had their credentials out where you could see them, off whether they looked like your idea of the thing before you bothered to learn whether they were the thing. I want to say something to you. If you have ever stood at a counter of your own and had a stranger decide who you were before you had said a word, if you have ever been sent to the annex, if you have ever felt that old pull to make yourself smaller so the moment could end, so the person deciding about you could keep their comfortable wrong idea and you could just get on with your day, do not go to the annex. Not because you owe anyone the truth of you on their schedule, but because you owe yourself the patience to let it arrive on its own. What you are is not up for a stranger's vote. It never was. A person who decides who you are before they know your name is not describing you. They are describing themselves, and they are doing it out loud in front of everyone, and the kindest and hardest thing you can do is to let them. Let them be wrong out loud. Stand where you are standing, keep the folder, ask them to open it, and if they will not wait, because the record keeps itself, and it arrives with its boots on, and when it comes it will not need you to raise your voice. I did not raise my voice at that counter. I have not had to raise it in 20 years. I have learned that the truest things are the ones you can say quietly, the way a man sets down something heavy so it does not break. Stand down. It's you. I remember the strap. Keeping the names is the whole job. And this, which I will leave you with, because it is the one thing I carried out of that gray morning that I did not carry in. You do not have to prove you earned your place to the person who is never going to believe you. You only have to keep standing in it. The morning will lift at the edges, the line will start to move, and the ones who matter, the ones worth having, will know exactly who you are.